Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of AWS Show and Tell. I am your host, Anil Nadaminti. I'm joining from New Jersey today. And I'm a senior solutions architect here at AWS working with enterprise customers. So, in today's episode, we are going to do a show and tell of an exciting topic that will dive deep into agent registry. But before we go into the details, let me introduce our guest speakers here today. We'll start with Dhaval.
Hey, very nice to meet you. I'm back again.
Yes.
I'm Dhaval Patel, and I am a principal GenAI architect. And along with my extended team who is here, worked on rolling out these new services which we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited.
Excellent. Chaitra.
Yeah, I'm Chaitra. First, show and tell, so I'm very excited. I'm a principal GenAI specialist, and I've been with AWS for about 7 years. And I got this chance to work on this service along with Dhaval and Avinash and others, so I'm very excited to talk about it today.
Hey, thanks. Avinash.
Hey, I'm Avinash Kaluri. I'm a senior solutions architect within AWS. I'm really excited joining all today and giving a demo on agent registry. Looking forward to have a great conversations. Please post all your questions. This is a new launch and we are really excited to hear all your feedback and take all the things that is valuable to you.
Hey, thanks, Avinash. So, let's talk about some details here, right? So, again, folks in the chat, let us know where you are joining from, so we can, we've seen folks joining from everywhere around the globe, like from New Zealand, Australia. Again, the time zone, but let us know where you're joining from, right? So, but let's before we go into the details, uh, let's explore why we need an agent registry, right? So, Dhaval, right? So what's the, why do we need an agent registry? What are we trying to solve here, right? So we've shown in this particular show and tell series
Yeah.
how people can build AI agents, how they can take these agents from POC to production, and how they can add governance, evaluations, security controls, and all of those. How they can build MCP servers, right? So in a matter of a few clicks,
Yeah.
right? So, but then how does the agent registry fit in the big picture here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, before I address that, I want to have I want to just ask the audience like a couple of questions. Like maybe start with a quick poll. Drop a comment as to how many agents you have today in production. Drop a comment, please. How many agents do you have, or are you working with? Like, how many agents are you working on right now? Tens, hundreds? I don't know. What's that number? All right, let's see. Folks are joining from London. Okay.
Yeah.
I already see questions coming from like, can I use agents from other clouds? I'm going to address that as well. So, 150. Oh my,
150, that's
Oh,
nice.
that's way
whoa.
ahead.
150 agents?
150 agents, right? So again, yeah, a lot of agents there. You're cooking a lot of stuff. So
Yeah. How many tools? Drop a number. How many tools do you have for your agents today? Tens, hundreds,
I
maybe
would say
thousands?
hundreds, thousands, maybe, right?
Yeah. Let's see.
Let's get it.
Definitely more than agents.
Let's get a debate, like whoever wins, agents versus tools.
So I'm expecting more number of tools as compared to number of agents. So, oh, he says I was waiting for this. Great. Okay. There's another one. 40 to 50 agents. Okay. 100 plus tools. Yeah, that's kind of a norm, right?
Nice.
Like almost 2 to 3 times more number of tools as compared to agents. Yes.
Right.
All right. All right. Couple of more minutes before I dive into the why part, why we launched this service. What were we hearing from the customers?
So the
And
numbers will keep rolling in. I guess maybe let's roll with the flow,
yeah,
right? So
yeah, let's roll in the flow. Yeah. So why don't you just flash that slide that I have? Okay. All right. So so you're already telling me these signals. You're giving me signals that you already have hundreds of agents and possibly thousands of tools already in your organizations. Imagine now you're one of them, right? Like you're part of one of the teams who is building these awesome agents and tools. Now imagine you have other peer teams within your org or outside your organization, within your company, or maybe outside of your company, right? Like it needs collaboration with other agents to put together a realistic, real world, production grade agentic system, right? You're kind of working with a system of agents, more than one agents, more than few more than one tool, obviously, right? You were talking about tens or hundreds of agents and thousands of tools. Now imagine like you have the sprawl of these agents, tools, skills, LLMs, APIs, and imagine now that you have multiple teams using these agents and tools in their own silos, right? Like, so kind of like team A develops certain types of agents which team B that might not be aware of, and then team C here, in for example, may be developing some other type of use cases in some other domain, solving different business problems. Now these teams continue to work in parallel, right, within your org or outside of your org in different use cases, right? However, as these number of teams grow, as number of agents grow, as number of tools grow, skills grow, right, you hit with this type of challenges. Number one, you don't know who is working on what, right? Which team is working on what.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, well, if you would have known who has developed which type of agents, probably the use case that you're working on, you would be able to expedite the delivery of that by reusing those cool agents that is out there already in your organization, right? Or you want to reuse them, right, and expedite your development effort, right? And then, it's not only about like, all right, I see a tool, I see an agent developed by other team, let me just use it like that, right? You're concerned about, well, is it safe and secure using these agents and tools in production? Should I use it? What are the implications of using it? How popular is it? What are the evaluation metrics? Should I use it or not, right? All of those things matter, and you want to also kind of understand the performance of these tools and kind of get the extended visibility and observability of these agents before you use it,
So
right?
in short, are you saying, Dhaval, that we need like a unified view of what's happening within the organization, where these agents are located, what are the governance controls that can be applied? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of need a unified catalog of these heterogeneous resources that is spread across your teams and views and organizational boundaries, and you kind of have a 360-degree view of all these resources in one view. And it's not only just cataloging these resources, but it is more than that. Like you want to also allow your consumers, your users, to kind of use natural language queries to kind of find what's out there, right? And then you want them to consume and use your agents and cool agents that you have developed, right? So you need that. And that too, like the administrators or the people who are managing these catalogs might want to put some guardrails and security vulnerability checks to make sure that nobody sneaks in their malicious agents and tools or APIs for the consumers to consume, right? So you kind of compromise the security as well if they do so, right? So that's exactly why we launched a fully managed serverless AWS agent registry to manage all of these heavy lifting that enterprises needs in order to manage, govern access to these agents and tools and APIs. Yeah. And I already see a question like, can I use these agents from other clouds? Yes, agent registry is agnostic to wherever you have deployed, whichever cloud service provider you're using to kind of actually deploy these agents and tools. It is agnostic to that. You can store the metadata of these heterogeneous resources across the board within AWS or even outside of AWS and catalog them here in AWS Agent Registry. Yeah, right. All right. And then, so I'm just going to go real quick, and then we're going to shift into the show and tell. Show and tell, especially, we are going to show you demonstrations of these features, and we are going to go through the code as well. So hang on to that as well. All right. So here are the high-level features that we launched. By the way, Agent Registry is right now in public preview. So we are also working on launching a few more features until we go for the GA. But for now, in the registry, we allow cataloging the metadata of different types of heterogeneous resources like MCP servers, A2A agents. You might also have agent skills. And you might want to also have custom resources like APIs or LLMs through OpenAPI, for example, right? You might want to get all the metadata of these resources that you have in your enterprise. And by the way, these resources can sit anywhere. By the way, as I said, like it can sit on EKS, it can sit on EC2, it can sit on AgentCore, it can sit outside of AWS. We don't really care about, as long as you are able to put that metadata into our catalog. It offers this fully unified catalog with the CRUD APIs to register and deregister the resources within the catalog, and offers semantic and lexical and filter-based search. Like, so your consumers can search what's out there, right? And then the registry needs to be kept up to date, right? Like, let's say if a developer changes an MCP server, adds a few more tools, for example, or a developer changes an A2A agent and adds more skills, for example, right? You want to make sure that all of your changes get into the registry, and you keep it updated. And that's exactly why we launched explicit metadata sync functionality. And we're going to dive deeper. We're going to show you the code as well. How do we do that? And then for those people who are actually administering and managing these registries at scale, right? They might want to also have some kind of an workflow or approval workflows embedded into their pipeline before people can publish their MCPs or A2A agents or skills metadata into the registry before it is allowed officially to be part of the unified catalog, right? They might want to run security vulnerability checks, duplication checks, right? They might also want to bring their own security vulnerability checks, if using any third-party vendors as well, before they say, yes, I approve these resources, metadata, they are safe, they're secure for the other consumers to consume.
So it looks like we have multiple personas here, right? So one is a persona that builds the agents, a consumer that consumes the agent, and an administrator that approves or denies or publishes the agent.
Yeah, that definitely, like at very high level, there are three personas that we definitely see. But before we dive into the personas, you can consume these. I just want to make this point. Like, you can consume these APIs using AWS console. Or, sorry, you can log in at AWS console and create registries. By the way, you can create multiple registries in the same AWS account, by the way. And generally, people try to create different registries for different life cycle of the software, like one for dev, one for pre-production, another for production, and make sure that everything goes fine. So you can log into AWS console, you can create multiple registries, you can create multiple records and add records or mutate the records within the registry. You can explicitly sync with the underlying resources using our explicit metadata sync feature. You can use both of three. And by the way, very important, we also offer registry as an MCP server, MCP tool. So you can also use an MCP tool to search across the registry records through your favorite IDE, like Kiro or Cloud Code or any of the favorite IDEs that supports MCP tools, right? And it is integrated with the AgentCore identity. So that means any incoming calls for searching the registry needs to be a valid authorized call. You can integrate using IAM and or OAuth, and you can kind of have the complete visibility and observability in terms of CloudTrail and CloudWatch even. So,
I think there's a question on permissions, Dhaval.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to clarify the IAM and OAuth um, to the registry itself.
Oh yeah, sure. I presume. Oh, permissions can be used forced through IAM, SCPs, and resource policies. Well, yeah. So you can use IAM policies to practice the least privilege principle. Like you can say, hey, this is an administrator user. Administrators can only do such and such things and such operations, for example, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
oh, hey, he's a publisher persona, and that's actually the good segue to our next one. Is like three primary personas, right? The administrators who manage and administer the registries has almost all full access to the registry's operations most of the times. They can also institute the guardrails and pipelines and orchestrate the workflow approval process, right? And then there's a publisher who are developers who are actively developing new agents or updating the agents tools and want to update their metadata as part of the registry. And then there's a consumer who looking for like what's out there. I want to search and I want to onboard and I want to
Mm-hmm.
call that, right? So according to these personas, you can have a different IAM policies to enforce these access permissions as to who can do what. Um, so yes, you can use IAMs permissions. By the way, for SCP policies, hang on to that. We're working on like the multi-account support as well. So that's kind of like a part of the roadmap as well. But for now, use IAM policies
And
Yeah.
to access control.
And Dhaval, in fact, the demo is actually gonna tailor for individual personas. So wait on that. You will get to see like what individual persona is actually gonna do within the a registry and what actions are tied to that persona.
And I just want to add one thing on the personas. These are the three personas that we have defined, and we say, hey, here are key personas that interact with registry. But since we have talked to customers, there might be different personas that customers have. For example, a risk and audit kind of manager, right? For them, the permission has to be even lesser. So they can create different personas and set up these policies and have those personas interact with registry.
Yeah. Well, let's see the code. Avinash.
All
All
right.
right. Can you bring up my screen, Anil?
Here you go.
Cool. Thank you. I am not going to walk through again like what's registry and all. I'm pretty sure you guys have understood that and a great context already by Dhaval. This is a quick look at the architecture diagram on what we are going to do it now. So we have admin, publisher, and a consumer. At a very high level, admin is going to create the registry and maintain the registry. Publisher is the one who is actually playing the game of submitting the records and updating the records.
Mm-hmm.
And then admin is the one again comes into the picture in order to do the governance. Like he's going to control and make sure the records that have been submitted by the publisher are qualified and approved. Well, now everything is done. So the end users are the consumers who are going to consume this. And it could be possible either through Kiro or Cloud Code, or you can have your own stuff in order to consume this. So that's the high level on different personas. Let's walk through and see the actual code.
So while we are waiting for the code to load, we have like one question in the chat. Is the agent registry like a Docker registry?
Well, it's more than that. Like it's a purpose-built registry for building the agentic application. So things like how people discovers other agents, what is the metadata, possibly additional types of enriched metadata that is very purpose-built for building the agentic application. For example, if you're searching a regular use or a resource, you would need to know where's the endpoint, how to call that resource, how to authenticate against the resource. Yes, that is kind of common to a kind of a generic service
Registry.
registry. Yeah.
Mhm.
But then you might want to add a lot of additional metadata related to MCP tools, for example, or ETL, like what type of protocol does it talk? How do I create a connection to the MCP server? What type of connection types does MCP server support? By the way, MCP we have a protocol specific metadata, like MCP has MCP and A2A. There are protocols, and there's evolving protocols like ACP protocol, and there are different types of schemas for supporting different types of resources like OpenAI schema, OpenAI schema, right? So it is purpose built for storing the metadata related to agentic AI resources, and also understands the nitty-gritty details of the protocol like MCP, A2A. There's an evolving protocol for skills, for example, right? So all of these purpose-built features, including metadata sync, how do you sync with the underlying resources? Like, you need to know and you need to understand the protocol for syncing with the MCP server, which a normal generic service registry might not have these features and functionalities, for example. Right. So this is exactly what we are bringing you these features. Yeah, Avinash, you want to chime in?
No, yeah. Well, the theme is actually same, making the life easier to have more of the search and discovery and one-stop shop. But as the landscape evolves, a lot of features and functionalities related to that particular topic is getting evolved. So Agent Registry is your one-stop shop where you can go discover and audit your agents and make them reuse and make them consumable by others. But
and
yes,
by the way,
any registry shares a common theme.
Yeah, and by the way, like, think about like how these discovering the registry is going to be used at a build time and at the runtime. Like, at the build time, these developers are looking for like what's out there, what are those agents, who talks which protocol, right? That's kind of similar to the other types of functionality, like where you're just searching for an API, right? Like, where can I find these APIs? But then at the runtime, we are actually calling an agent calling another agent. Imagine this registry search API being used to dynamically find and orchestrate how should an agent execute the workflow given the user query, right? And that too also has to be done in a progressive disclosure manner where you're not adding more context and creating a context bloat. And that has to be performant enough, right? So there are so many features that you really need in an agent registry, which is purpose built, which a regular Docker registry or a generic service registry might not be able to satisfy your requirements.
And we're going to show all of that right now in this live demo here.
Let's shift to the demo. Most of the questions would be answered there.
Yeah.
All right. First thing first, this requires Boto 1.42.87 or more than that. So make sure you have that particular version. And all that I did is a quick session client ready here and few helper functions from me to really demonstrate today. So the first thing is the admin persona. As earlier discussed, admin has access on creating and updating the records, and at the superficial, all the access related to the registry. And here are the quick policies that we are trying to attach for an admin. And these policies are like update registry, delete, submit registry record for approvals, which being the primary ones. So all that I have done is just created this policy and a quick IAM user so that we can traverse for individual personas in this notebook. And here I have a user called registry admin demo policy, whose policy has been attached with registry demo policy. And the username is registry admin demo. So now, first thing first, again, within the agent registry, this is the service that you would be using called Bedrock AgentCore control. And this is the control plane that holds all the CRUD operations of the agent registry. And I've created a quick client for this admin calling admin CP, which is the control plane. And using this, I am going to go ahead and use the rest of all the operations on the registry. All right. So using the same, we are creating a quick registry here. And the command that is required is create registry. But where this entire governance comes to the picture is with this one, the approval configuration. If the auto approval is false, which means to say that the user or the publishers who submits the records and those records are not automatically approved, and there needs to be a governance flow following accordingly. So this is pretty important. When you create a registry, make sure that you have auto approval as false. Here we have a quick registry that got created, naming Enterprise Agent Registry, and it says auto approval is false. Any questions on this?
So I just want to chime in here, like why we kept this auto approval flag. So there are enterprises who needs to have a specific workflow for performing the security checks whenever somebody creates a new record or metadata record, or even updating the metadata record. We think that any changes to the existing approved metadata records needs to go through the approval process if administrator wants to enforce that. This is the flag for that. Like, make sure that nobody bypasses those security checks and just updates the metadata out of band, right? And sneaks in malicious type of like a malicious user may sneak in a different type of different types of vulnerabilities, like tool poisoning. By just merely changing the description, you can inject a tool poisoning attack, right? So we think that enterprises in the production, they would need to turn this off with the auto approval as false. So you don't want to do that for production, but there are use cases where, like, you're just creating a registry in a dev environment. You make sure that people are able to test, perform unit testing. At that point you can have the auto approval as true, and you can bypass those checks and balances. But I wouldn't recommend to do that in pre-prod or production environments. You want to do that.
And there's another use case where this might actually hold good, wherein a CI/CD pipeline is doing all of the checks for the agents and tools deployed. So the metadata is already kind of cleansed, and it's all scanned. So you just add it to the registry. So we have heard where the deployment DevOps pipeline takes care of it. Then you can have an auto approval where records just come in and are approved.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Avinash.
That's a great point.
That's good.
All right. So once the registry is created, all that I have done here is I wrote my helper function to poll and get to know the latest status of the registry. Usually it takes few seconds for the registry to get created and make it available. And all that I see here is, yes, the registry has been created. And here is a quick post data that you're gonna get within the registry. And I can see that registry ID, registry ARN, all these sort of details. So once you have that, all that I have done again is to check how many registries or what are all the registries that are there. And the method that I use here is get registry. And it shows me a list of registries that are available. And within this account, all that I see is Enterprise Agent Registry that has been created and ready to go. So a quick command on list registries. Again, I can see there is only one registry. I wanted to make sure, like, there might be a case where you have multiple registries and where you have to drill down just within the registry that you wanted to use, right? At that stage, you can use this list registries to get a list of all the registries in a particular AWS account. Okay, until now, the registry has been created. But now you wanted to know what's inside the registry. For example, the records, right? An admin list records. So all that we have done is the list records here, list registry records, and we could see there are no, because we haven't submitted any records and there is no publisher persona yet discussed in this particular example. Okay, we could see no records. So now comes the publisher persona. So publisher would be actually able to submit the record and also update the record and delete the record. And here is the quick policies that we are making it. And then in the similar way, what we have done for the admin user, we are creating another IAM user and attaching the same policy. So now we have registry publisher user with the policy register publisher demo, right? Again, to access the rest of the CRUD operations, you need a client. And all that we have done is we created a publisher client here.
Yeah, so Avinash, let's move on to the portion where actually the publisher, like a developer, has already gotten an agent deployed somewhere, and now that developer needs to submit it to make it part of the registry. Let's shift
Here,
right there.
here it is.
Okay.
So this is an important operation within the entire registry, and personally my favorite, and where earlier Chaitra and Dhaval also emphasized, is the URL synchronization. But first thing first, again, we are submitting an MCP record here. All that we could see is publisher create registry record, this method, and the descriptor type really specifies on what type of record that you're inserting. It could be either be A2A, MCP, custom, skills, etc. Right? So I'm submitting this MCP record here, which is the public AWS knowledge MCP, and I have my synchronization type URL, and I'm giving this public URL that has been defined it here.
Okay,
Right?
let me add
yeah,
here.
can we
Sorry.
zoom that
Yeah.
out? Yeah, can we zoom in and explain that part, right?
Yeah, let's zoom in that part of create
Yep.
registry record. All right, so here's what we are showing here is that you have a registry. It is a regional artifact, yeah, with multi-AZ, fully managed artifact, right? It has its own identifier, right? Now, once you create the registry, a registry is it holds the records. It's a container for the records. Each record corresponds to either an MCP server or an A2 agent or an agent skill or any custom API or resource or an LLM also, right? And that metadata record has an associated schema. Now the question is like, well, a developer who is developing an agent or tool might be running those agents anywhere, right? And that developer, in order to make that agent available in the registry and as part of the catalog, needs to register, and that's the record that's the registration, or that's the create registry record operation that Avinash is showing, right? Like, I need to register. What's that metadata? What's that schema? What's the URL of that agent or a tool? How do we authorize that? What are the tool schema? What is the agent skills, and so on and so forth. I just want to mention that here that I just want to quickly mention that either you can explicitly or manually create the registry record by manually putting that metadata record in line here in this call.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can say, oh, well, I don't want to handle that complexity of manually like copy pasting that schema here. Rather, you can say, oh, registry, go and fetch that metadata explicitly, automatically, by creating a connection to the underlying URL resource, fetch that and update and create a record automatically.
And Dhaval, that's the example that we have. In fact, the next cell exactly talks about that, and it's going to show the entire configuration that has been pulled. So once the registry record is created, right, and when the URL sync happens, here it is.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We should go back to the URL and go back to the create. Yeah, so the synchronization is exactly like explicitly synchronized. Like, where is that agent hosted? You give their URL of that. And then most of the times, these agents or MCP servers are protected by OAuth. So Correct. You can also specify like, oh, what is the client ID and secret that you want the registry to use, and integrate with the IDP of your choice, like Entra or Auth0 or Okta or even Cognito, right? Like you can integrate with that, and then fetch the access token, and then have the registry connect to that protected resource and fetch and sync the metadata. Avinash.
Yep.
So Avinash, there is a question. Maybe it relates to the identity that we're talking. So all agents enforce for an identity service. So there are two ways to look at it. There is an identity or auth for the registry itself, means you can configure IAM or OAuth, and are folks allowed to do CRUD operations and search on the registry. So that's one. Once you create the registry with that auth, yes, the registry will continue to hold that on. But then there are individual agents and tools, they are not enforced. They have their own auth mechanism. Registry is not enforcing that because they are the end server and they'll have their own auth. So to distinguish between the two, yes, registry supports IAM and auth.
Yeah, and this is a quick view about how that's happening anyways. All right, let me switch back to the code. So now the URL synchronization that you guys understood, this is the entire details that has been fetched. For example, you could see the auto-discovered metadata that is actually coming from that entire URL that we gave. And it also shows how many tools that has been found within that URL that has been given. And to take a little dive deep look, right, like what that URL sync actually discovered, I wrote a quick helper function to give you only the details about what's that has been achieved. For example, the AWS Knowledge MCP server, this is the URL that we have given to the sync. And we could see that it has found 6 tools with a version, schema version, all these sort of details, and a clear description about each and every tool. So this is all directly fetched from the synchronization URL. If this didn't happen, right? If this didn't happen, if you would have to go and explicitly add that configuration, this is how it's going to look. And believe me, this earlier you have been looking for 6 tools, and this is similarly, if you have like hundreds and hundreds of tools, you have to go and configure this type of schema for each and every tool and make it available. So all this sort of JSON thing, what Dhaval was mentioning earlier, you would have to manually do it. But that's the heavy lifting. Agent Registry does that for you.
Yeah, I just want to just show the schema. This schema that you're seeing here is MCP metadata record, right? So things like, what does that MCP server do? What type of protocols does it support? What's the location of that MCP server? What are the authorization? How does it authorize inbound calls? And then what specific tools does it host, and so on and so forth, like along with the tool description. Now, it's very important to share this, that these record schema, especially for MCP, are compliant to the standard and formal MCP registry specification. So we are not reinventing the wheel, right? We don't have our own schema for storing the tool schema. We reuse that when we comply with the open source open standard specification for MCP registry. And for A2A, we comply with A2A AgentCore's schema as well. For agent skills, we comply with agent skills specification, a formal skills.md file specification.
Yep.
Excellent.
All right. So let's move on. We have discussed enough on the MCP, and now the next one that I'm trying to create a registry record is A2A. So yeah, as Dhaval mentioned here, you can take all those sort of skills or details and within the agent cards, and you could submit it. We use the same command again here also, create registry record. And all that I can see is every record that has been created will actually be in a draft state. And similarly for the custom record, I'm not going to dive deep more into the custom record. We have already seen it's the similar method. The only thing that varies is about the descriptor type and the rest of the information in it, right? So here is a quick view of all the records that has been just created. MCP, A2A, custom, and everything is in draft state. So earlier we are talking about the governance. It is important to make sure that the user personas are not to explicitly control the tasks, right? So publisher shouldn't be able to submit approve the records, right? So he should be able to only submit. All that we are saying is a publisher has been has submitted these 3 records, and all of that are waiting for approval, right?
All right. So can you just focus on that API? Just highlight that API, please.
Yes, submit registry record. I'm actually going to show that in the next admin stuff to make it more precise. But submit registry record for approval takes the registry ID and the record ID, and it submits.
So when a publisher actually publishes, when the publisher is ready with their agent, for example, or a new version of an existing agent, for example, right? What you're saying is they need to call this API to make it part that metadata record to be part of the catalog, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So if publisher tries to self-approve, it shouldn't actually go through. And how do the approval app happens is through the update registry record. And the important parameter that it takes is the status, saying like I wrote approved here, self-approved attempt by the publisher, but technically you can have your own, but status should be in approved state.
Oh, yeah. So this is generally. Oh, wait a second. This should be done by the administrators, not the
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is what
So,
we are going to show. The policy has got into the constraint here and it denied. The publisher tried approving self-approval attempt and the access is denied. None
yeah.
of these records were actually approved
Yeah.
by the publisher, right? Again, admin comes back into the picture. All that he does is, see, these 3 records are still in the pending approval because they have been just submitted by the publisher. So the list registry records.
Yeah. So by the way, when the records are in pending approval, they are not searchable.
They're not consumable. Yes.
And are these records also version approved? Like, for example, version 1 can be approved, but version 2 can be draft?
Not today, but yes, in future there is versioning that will come. So today, if you add a record and update, it's the same record that's getting updated. But we will have versioning that will come, and then you'll be able to approve one version and not the other, etc.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So admin tries to get all the registry records now, and this is where the actual governance step takes into the picture. In fact, it could be a manual or it could be an automated process, all of that stuff. But once you get to have that registry records, you can inspect. And here, just for one record, we could see that MCP is still in pending approval, and it also shows the entire details of those records. And this is where it plays a major role to get and fetch all the information. So once the records are inspected.
Yeah, can I interrupt here again? So generally an administrator might want to not just take a look at the schema, but also like a holistic perspective. Like they might want to run security checks. They might want to institute a CI/CD pipeline. Like whenever a publisher publishes a record or submits a record for approval, generally administrators needs to consume that event. And by the way, AWS Registry emits or produces an event bridge event moment the publisher publishes or tries to get to publish or submits the record for the approval. The administrators can consume an event, detect that, oh, somebody's trying to seek the approval, and then run the pre-orchestrated flow or like pre-built flows and scans and security vulnerability checks. And then
we have that on the screen, Dhaval. Like,
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. This is it. So so you can see here, like you can have an automated CI/CD pipeline to kind of consume these events and then fetch maybe the container image, or maybe run some deeper checks on the container image if a container is secure and safe. They might want to get the schema of the tools. They might want to get the description of the tools, and they might want to match the description with the actual tool names to make sure nobody's doing a tool in poisoning attack. Or they might want to check like remote code execution type of attacks and make sure that nothing is fishy and suspicious in nature.
All the creative juices, like whatever the governance layer creative juices are there, it gives the scope for your admin personas or the security teams to actually go build them, because it's all event driven. Once an event is captured on the event bridge and gets to some sort of mode like a Lambda or DynamoDB or some mechanism, right? You can bring in all your creative juices and flow the governance layer that's there within your industry.
Yeah. By the way, this solution that we have published, you all should check out our code sample repo for this. There are a bunch of examples. We are actually 15 plus examples. If you can remain on that picture, by the way, I just want to call out the the Cisco AI Defense, which is one of the open source security scanners for tools and agents. I would highly recommend you go and check it out and evaluate that as well. We have the code sample that has the integration with the Cisco AI Defense as well, so that you can get a reference implementation out there.
Great call out there. Yeah.
All right, moving back to the code again. So now the records are in pending approval. Admin quickly checks about those, and the admin does update registry record status with the status as approved. And this is the method that's used with these details. And we could see that all the records are actually approved. So these records will be discoverable by the consumer persona. Now let's quickly take a look at the consumer persona. I'm not gonna dive deep again because the consumer policy, all those things still remains of what we discussed earlier with the admin. Let me actually show you the magic. Let me actually show you the actual magic. Yeah. All right. I built a quick helper function on the search, but I'm gonna show you what actually happens and what sort of searches are available within the agent registry. And the first thing, again, natural language discovery. If I just type security best practices, troubleshooting stuff, I can see there is MCP, AWS documentation MCP. There is a best practices troubleshooting details available within that MCP, and I can see that details here.
Now, when we do the search operation, right? So what metadata is available for the search, right? So
we are getting there. We'll get there. Metadata.
I think we should address that, Avinash. Hold on a second. We should address that right away here.
Okay.
All of the metadata present in the metadata record is indexed and is used to power the search.
Here it is.
Yeah.
So it is the record itself, right? Name, description of the record, and then the actual schema, whether it's the MCP schema, the A2A card, all of that is indexed. So you could fire a natural language search and be able to get all of these records back.
So somebody searching for any details inside an A2A card can actually directly access that using a search.
Yes.
So there is another example called inline content. In fact, if there is a record details within an inline content, even those are actually searchable. So not just the high level semantic or lexical search, but you could also use the inline search to get those details.
All right, let's go to the search API. Let's explore the API.
Yep.
And also give me 10 minutes.
We are really excited to show our demos. So yeah.
All right. So this is another search, almost similar to the first one, but where it gets really interesting is inline descriptor. This is one thing. I just wrote AWS documentation search, but that is an inline details within the entire MCP schema that I have it, and I could see it here. And somebody was asking about the metadata filter search. So yes, you could apply filters. And here, all that I'm telling is descriptor type, and I'm passing for the search registry records, descriptor type equivalent to MCP, and I'll get only the MCP based stuff as my output. And in the similar way, you can also specify not equal to, which is I wrote custom here. So within the 3 records, I should be able to see the A2A and MCP, and I could see them. So this is how you could apply the filters on top of your search.
So overall, like we support, like the search is powered by 3 things: the semantic and lexical search based on the keywords and natural language query, number 1. And then you can also on top specify specific filters like descriptor type equals to MCP or A2A or skills or custom, as Avinash showed. You can also put the filters based on version as well as name. That would be the best practice. Like if you know what you're searching, if you know what type of resource you're searching, you better put it in the filters rather than a natural query. So instead of you saying, give me all the MCP tools for order management in a natural language, we would recommend rather say order management in the natural language and add a filter called as descriptor type equals to MCP. That would be a much better and higher quality search results.
Yeah.
That makes
And
sense.
this is where an entire end-to-end flow happens. You can search through your natural language, right, and get the right tools and details. And once you get those tools, you know the registry records within those tools, and you can fetch the exact registry records. And this is how an entire story that ties back. Here we search it for AWS documentation and knowledge tools, and we got those details. And now I know what records are there inside those. I can go fetch them directly. All right, Chaitra, you wanna take it over from here?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So let me just show a quick thing. So what I'm going to talk about is IDEs and how to connect registry with IDEs. And the IDEs, think of it as two personas we saw, the consumers and publishers will be using the IDE mostly because these are developers. So consumer is looking at, hey, let me see what is available within the registry, agents and tools so that they can build applications using that. Publishers are going to search to see, is this agent or tool available and do I have to build it? So this is what the flow looks like. An agent or tool developer goes to an IDE like Kiro. Kiro is our IDE. So I'm going to show you an example using that. And then the first thing they'll do is discover using the registry. And then if not available, then they build it. And here we are saying, hey, they'll deploy to AgentCore runtime, which is part of our AgentCore platform portfolio, where you can deploy agents and MCP servers. And they could be using Strands or any other framework to build this. So let's look at how it actually all comes together. So this is my Kiro IDE.
So just Chaitra, one clarification, right? So
Yeah.
I know you're showing this via Kiro, but this is accessible via any agentic ID.
Yes,
correct?
yes. And why is that? It's because the search of the registry is available as an MCP endpoint as well. So I could just use any MCP client and connect to that MCP endpoint and be able to do search. And that is exactly what I've done here. So keep in mind that the agent registry has two kinds of auth. One is IAM based auth and one is OAuth based. And the search inherits that auth. So even from Kiro, you could, or any ID, you have to follow that auth mechanism. If it's IAM, then you add it to the mcp.json, the server configuration. And generally, IAM from IDs to IAM is either through IAM Identity Center or through the AWS dev profile. And that's how you can get the auth. But if it is OAuth, then you have to follow mechanisms like DCR or CIMD to get the auth token, and then IDs connect. So here, for simplicity's sake, I have assumed an IAM-based registry. I'm connecting to my registry, which is IAM-based. And I have configured it in my mcp.json as the endpoint of the registry itself. Now, once I connect to that, I'm able to use the agent to actually, do some natural language query and get the answers. So first, what I said was search my registry for e-commerce tools. Now, the specific registry I've configured has an e-commerce tool and other tools. So I'm searching and it's invoking that MCP, which is search registry records. And it's firing that against my registry. And it says, hey, I found one server and it has all of these tools. Now we can see that it's so easy for a developer to go search. You really don't need a user interface to log in and check what is available, but you're able to do it all through this IDE. Now I'm saying, hey, give me more details on one of these tools. And Kiro, because it's an agent, it's able to give me really good information on, hey, here is a schema, here is the endpoint. Now this particular tool server I have deployed on AgentCore runtime. So it says, hey, here is how you connect the protocol, and it says it's IAM based. That's great. Now what I do is I say, hey, I want to add a new tool, right? Now, the get order details is pretty, extensive information that it gives. I just want to add get order status. So are you able to do it? Now, what it does is that it says, now I have configured another thing called Kiro Powers. As a developer, I'm getting access to the search through this MCP, but I can also add powers to be able to publish to the registry using the registry APIs. And that is what I've done. It says, okay, now I have to update a registry record, right? That is not through MCP. MCP is search and get the tools. So in order to be able to update the registry, I'm not writing, CLI commands, code. What I've done is I've created a Kiro power. I've given it some helper steering example code to say, hey, here is how you interact with registry using Boto 3 APIs, and it is able to do it. It's saying, okay, let me add a tool. It's calling this power, update registry. It's written a Python code based on how it understands, and I run it. I say, okay, use UV instead of Python. And then I say, okay, after update, are you able to, first it has updated. Once the record updates, I think Dhaval talked about it, the whole record, it had 5 tools. Now it added a 6th tool. It has gone to the draft status because we do not want auto approval of any of these. Even on an update, it should go through that approval process, wherein maybe you want to run scans again because a new tool has come in and a human approver has to approve it. So it has gone to draft status. Now I go outside and I say, okay, let's update it. It says, hey, it has gone to draft. Are you ready to submit for approval? I say yes. So it executes the submit registry record for approval, which Avinash was showing you. I say, yeah, great. Let's submit for approval. Now I've set up a workflow offline. I don't want to show you Slack. So a message came to me on Slack and it said, hey, this record is ready to be approved. So I went as an approver. I went and approved all of that. Now I said, hey, can you check the status? It says, yeah, it is approved. Now, once it is approved, keep in mind that the search has to index that data. So there could be a little bit of time it takes because it's eventual consistency. So just wait a little bit of time before you search again. Now I say, hey, great. Now let's run the search again. This is now connected to the MCP search just to make sure that a consumer who is searching is able to see the new tool. Now it runs the search again. It invokes the tool and it says, hey, I did not get the record. This is what the consistency comes in.
Mhm.
I said, okay, let's wait for some time. And I say, again, let's run it now. And now it says, hey, your new tool has come into the registry. It is approved. It is for use. So now a consumer persona who comes in is able to search and get this new tool. Now I say, hey, can give me all of the details, and it gives. So I'm just to make sure I'm using a combination of 2 things. I've connected the search as an MCP, and I've also created some powers to interact with the registry itself. As a publisher, I need those permissions to be able to publish and update those records. And that is what I showed. And now if you want to use all of the code we have shown so far, here it is. The GitHub, I think Anil already put it on chat. And we have a lot of examples. Getting started is pretty simple. It'll show you how to do all of the CRUD operations and other things. And advanced goes through some end-to-end use cases. And Kiro is also one of the examples. Approval workflow that Avinash showed is also here. And how do agents connect to runtime? We didn't show that demo, but here is an example here where how do agents at runtime discover and be able to connect to the tools and agents?
So what does this unlock for us, right? So let's talk about that as we get to the end of the session here. We have an agent registry. The agents can be discoverable, MCP servers, skills, and what does that unlock for the agentic use cases?
Yeah, I think it unlocks the enterprises to have a consistent, governed, managed catalog so that it can reduce the duplication of the efforts and allow teams to scale and ship agents faster. Otherwise, they will be in that vicious cycle of developing things from scratch when things already exist. So this will allow the enterprises to scale.
And agents can also discover other agents that are available, make those agentic calls, and then essentially it's an agentic framework at that point.
Yeah, and not
Exactly.
just that, I think for the SaaS providers also, like the people end up using third party and in third party agents or integrate with other third party tools, and they also need to discover where these tools and agents are and needs to develop trust with them in order to orchestrate the flows end to end. So this is kind of a glue, I would say, a glue point of like having that end to end integration going on.
Excellent. Thanks for that summary there. So this is from our current episode today. We'll bring back Dhaval, Chaitra, and Avinash to talk more when we go into GA. But this is from us live streaming today. Feel free to reach back again on the same channel, same time next week. That's it from our side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.